Die Zauberflöte, The Magic Flute, by Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. Mozart's The Magic Flute is at once sublime and majestic. Deeply touching, often childish, frightening even. Sublime, touching, childish, and frightening. It sounds, in short, like a perfect metaphor for life itself, and it is probably this combination of improbable elements which makes it a perennial favourite of intellectuals, of humanists, and of children. Its combination of the sublime and the earthy makes it also a perfect metaphor for the boy genius Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, who many consider was the greatest composer of them all. All art aspires to the quality of music, it is said, to which we might add, and all music aspires to the quality of Mozart. The Magic Flute comes late in Mozart's career. Indeed, it was his last great hit, so we have to go back over the 35 years of his short life to try to discover what it is about this native of Salzburg that has spawned legend, has created an industry of idol worship, and makes him probably the most universally admired musician of all time. Well, for a start, he was a child prodigy. His father, Leopold Mozart, was a distinguished musician in his own right, and young Wolfgang showed amazing virtuosity from his earliest days. It is said he took an interest in his sister's harpsichord lessons at the age of 2. By 3, he was making chords on the harpsichord. By 4, he was playing short pieces, and by 5, he was composing. That music, part of the overture to Ascanio in Alba, is relatively mature music. He wrote it when he was 15. His father notoriously chose to exploit his children's gifts, and Mozart's earliest years were spent crisscrossing the continent, performing before the royal and archiepiscopal heads of Europe. Mozart was a keyboard player of genius. He also played the violin, and had an uncanny feeling for the emotional range of every instrument of the orchestra. And he would write, as we'll hear in a moment, some of the most dazzling music ever written for the human voice. His music, in whatever sphere he was writing, speaks to our souls with an intimacy few composers approached, and none attained with such consistency. You could find examples of the sublime Mozart in the slow movement of any of his piano concertos. Here it happens to be number 24 in C minor. Here, his mastery of the violin in a little of the first movement of the third violin concerto. and even the humble bassoon, the butt of other composers' musical jokes, is dignified with a lovely concerto of its own. Who would have thought to describe the bassoon as sweet-sounding or nimble before hearing that concerto? Sacred music brought out further depths in Mozart, whether in the boundlessly happy religious zeal of the Exsultati Jubilati, or in the splendours of the Coronation Mass. Or in the terrifying solemnities of the final Requiem, which he believed, quite rightly as it turned out, would be his winding sheet, and which he left uncompleted at his death. His versatility covered the entire range of music. Here is the opening of the third movement of his 14th Piano Sonata, the most intimate chamber music for solo instruments. His versatility also extended to the grandest symphonies, an art form to which he made a stunning contribution, paving the way, you might say, for the powerful achievements of Beethoven, who would take up his symphonic mantle. Here is a reminder of the majestic Symphony No. 40 in G minor. But if Mozart had written not a note for the concert hall, the chamber salon, or the cathedral, if his entire career had been confined to the opera house, he would still merit consideration among the greatest composers of all time. That he wrote 4 of the major pillars of the operatic repertory is not disputed: The Marriage of Figaro, Don Giovanni, Così fan tutte, and The Magic Flute. But he also wrote a number of works which from any other composer would be considered a life's work well spent: Idomeneo, The Abduction from the Seraglio, La Clemenza di Tito. Let's just remind ourselves of the special character of the 3 great Italian operas he wrote with the librettist Lorenzo da Ponte. The Marriage of Figaro, with its tale of intrigue and plotting by the wily valet Figaro against his autocratic master, the Count Almaviva. A work as revolutionary in its sentiments as it was in its musical virtuosity. Who, having once heard the thundering chords of D minor which herald the return of the stone statue in Don Giovanni, can ever forget their menace? And surely no opera ever better caught the sweet sadness and trials of young love so perfectly as Così fan tutte. The Magic Flute was a different kettle of fish altogether. It was customary in olden times for a man to come on stage at the beginning of a performance armed with a long pole or staff and thump 3 times on the stage to tell the audience to stop chattering, pay attention. The play is about to begin. Indeed, that practice is still carried out in the Comédie Française in Paris. And it is for this reason that most operas begin with 2 or 3 loud chords. But these chords we have just heard are not any old loud chords. These are 3-fold chords, and in the key of E flat, 3 flats. The significance, or at least the alleged significance of which, we shall discuss in a moment. The Magic Flute is one of the most complex operas in the entire repertory for the following reason. No one seems able to decide whether it is a very childish piece of work, elevated to great art by some of Mozart's most sublime music, or whether it is a very noble piece, occasionally trivialized by some pantomime silliness. Well, of course, the truth of the matter is that it is both things. It is a delightful pantomime that has entertained families and children for over 200 years, and it is also a profound statement on the human condition by one of the most cerebral of all composers ever to put pen to paper, Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. But is it really an opera? Is it a grand opera? Is it a play with music? Is it a comic opera? Well, again, it's really all those things. Some people insist in grafting on additional layers of meaning to the magic flute, but it is worth noting that around the time the magic flute was written, Mozart had become a Freemason. The opera does indeed contain a number of elements of Freemasonry, and elements of Masonic symbolism are said to permeate this piece. More than one scholar has written a weighty book to explain the depths of Masonic influence on such matters as the chord structures of the magic flute. The number 3 has particular relevance for Freemasons, and so, presumably because of its 3 flats, has the key of E flat. These 2 features recur frequently throughout the opera, whenever Sarastro and his noble court are quoted. The 3-fold chords are a sort of Masonic signature tune of the piece. If you want a quick historical fix on the background to the composition of the magic flute, and especially the relationship between Mozart and the impresario librettist Schikaneder, you can't do much better than rent a video of the film Amadeus. Because there the unlikely partnership of the music hall comedian and the greatest composer of all time is made brilliantly clear. Who was this Schikaneder? He's gone down in history as something of a lowlife, or at best as a P.T. Barnum of the opera business. But in fact, he had his serious side, and after years as a strolling actor, had established himself in Vienna. He had once played Hamlet in his own touring company, not the ideal audition role for Papageno in The Magic Flute, which is a comic part, but it tells one something about his seriousness of purpose. By the time he came into Mozart's life, he had his own theatre, the Theater auf der Wieden, which was a sort of music hall on the outskirts of Vienna, and there he presented what we would once have called variety shows to a popular audience. Mozart was no snob. He was an associate of princes, the friend of archbishops, but he never lost his roots, or what we might call the common touch. Indeed, one of his ambitions in life, and this is brought out in the film Amadeus, was to found a truly German national school of opera, entirely free of all that Italianate nonsense which was filling the opera houses of the day. He had already written one triumphantly successful opera in German, Die Entführung aus dem Serail, to give Il Seraglio its proper German name, and it contains music as wonderful and as noble as any in his later Italian works. So it was natural that Mozart should accept a commission to write a German opera, and happily it came to pass that the Magic Flute would enter into the repertory as a kind of national opera of the German-speaking peoples. To attend a matinee performance of Die Zauberflöte, the Magic Flute, in Germany or Austria is to be present at an expression of national and familial pride rather akin to a good rousing Aida before an Italian audience. Schikaneder helped write the libretto. It is based on various mythological and fairy tale sources, and Schikaneder, in the great tradition of actor-managers, played the comic lead of Papageno, the bird-catcher, on the first night. The opera enjoyed huge popular success at its premiere, and it is one of those operas, Don Giovanni and The Marriage of Figaro are other examples, which have never been out of the repertory in the 200 years since they were written. A delight to the most intellectual among us, an inspiration and moral uplift to the purest among us, and a joy and a wonder to the child which we hope is in all of us. As the curtain rises, we meet Tamino, who is a prince, an Egyptian prince, and better still, a tenor. He is our hero. He is being pursued across the stage by a mighty dragon or serpent. Now, you would, if serious symbolism was your thing, point out that the book of Genesis begins with serpent problems. You would also point out that pursuits by dragons are stock pantomime material. You would draw the conclusion that here, in the very opening bars, we have that odd combination of the philosophical, serpents are symbols of life and of sexuality, and the childish, they are the original spooky monsters of every child's nightmares, that will characterize the whole opera. But as this could prove ultimately tiresome, we'll make the point this once and move on. Enter Tamino, stage left, pursued by serpent.
So wenig verloren, zu Hilfe, so wenig verloren, der listige Schlange zu Opfer erkoren, barmherzige Götter.
At this point, 3 mysterious ladies enter noisily. They are servants of the Queen of the Night, and they slay the dragon. Triumphantly, they tell us, and introduce us to a more lyrical moment, which is their signature tune. Before we go on, maybe we should familiarise ourselves with some of the many characters in this fairly complex opera. Sarastro, first of all, is master of the temple, and will represent for us everything that is noble, true, and good. And if you want to be really specific about it, Freemasonry. The Queen of the Night, whom we'll meet in a moment, and who is a coloratura soprano, represents all that is evil, cruel, and vengeful. And, again, some would say, Roman Catholicism, in the glittering shape of the Austrian Archduchess Maria Theresa. She has a lyric soprano daughter, Pamina, and her 3 servants, the 3 ladies. There are also the earth characters, led by Papageno, half man, half parrot, and wholly delightful, and he will eventually find his mate in Papagena. There are many more we shall meet in their turn, but let's meet Papageno, the most consistently delightful character in the opera, the one with whom every child identifies because he has all our appetites and all our frailties. As I said, this role was initially played by Schikaneder himself. He enters dressed invariably in a parrot suit because the name Papageno means parrot man. He has one of those autobiographical arias in which he introduces himself, to the accompaniment of his own panpipes, and tells us that he makes his living catching birds.
Ich Vogelfänger bin bekannt, bei alt und jung im ganzen Land. weiß mit dem Locken umzugehen und mich auf Pfeifen zu verstehen. Drum kann ich froh und lustig sein, denn alle Vögel sind ja mein.
Tamino and Papageno meet, and we learn that Papageno sells the birds he catches to the three ladies. When he takes credit for slaying the dragon, the three ladies punish him by padlocking his mouth and giving him stones instead of bread in payment for the birds. The noble Tamino is treated better. He is given a portrait of the Queen of the Night's daughter, Pamina. It is a medallion portrait which Tamino will wear about his neck. He is smitten by Pamina's beauty and sings a lovely lyrical aria in praise of her beauty, telling how the portrait, das Bildnis, has stolen away his heart.
Dies Bildnis ist bezaubernd schön, wie noch kein Auge je gesehen. Ich fühl es, wie dies Götterbild mein Herz mit neuer Regung füllt. Mein Herz mit neuer Regung füllt.
The three ladies will also give Tamino a magic flute to guide and protect him. And to Papageno, they give a set of magic bells. The Queen of the Night has decided that Tamino is the man to rescue her daughter Pamina from what she considers the evil clutches of Sarastro, and she appoints him to this role in the first of her two great arias. The Queen has the most wonderful vocal fireworks perhaps of any character in any opera. The Queen of the Night is a coloratura soprano. Indeed, she might be described, not disrespectfully, as the mother of all coloraturas. Coloratura means simply colourful, and refers to the way a composer will use lots of notes to dazzle the audience with the virtuosity of the singer. Most often coloratura is used to show the innocence and unspoiled charm of the heroine. For example, in Bellini's La Sonnambula, the girlish glee of the soprano heroine when she is united with her lover gives a good idea of the more usual use of coloratura in opera. But here, in the Queen of the Night's first aria, perhaps uniquely, it suggests instead the dazzling blandishments of evil. She sings, "Du, du, du. You are the one who will rescue my daughter, and in return I shall give you her hand in marriage."
Ja, du wirst der Tochter Retter sein.
The Queen of the Night's entrances and exits are always heralded by a thunderclap. Not, perhaps, an ideal quality in a mother-in-law, though by no means uncommon. It is one of the miracles of this opera that Mozart can seamlessly unite the light-hearted and the serious, often in the same ensemble. And the ensembles of this opera, that is, the numbers where several singers sing together, are among its greatest joys. Here is one example only: the quintet for Papageno, for the noble Tamino, and the three ladies. It starts off as a comic situation, with Papageno rudely trying to sing with his mouth full of padlock.
Vor Strafe sagen, denn seine Sprache ist nach ihm.
But soon Mozart's genius elevates it to truly great music as the three ladies introduce the three spirits who will guide Tamino and Papageno. The scene changes now to the inside of Sarastro's palace. Monostatos, a Moor, is making advances, as they used to say, to the pure Pamina, and she is strenuously resisting him.
Du feines Teuke nur herein.
O welche Marter, welche Pein!
Verloren ist dein Leben.
Der Tod mich nicht geben, denn meine Mutter erwartet mich. Sie steht vergraben sicherlich.
Die Sklaven legt ihr Fesseln an, mein Hass soll dich verderben.
Und lass mich lieber sterben, weil ich
Nun fort, lasst mich bei ihr allein.
Papageno succeeds in scaring off Monostatos, more by mutual repulsion than by any act of conspicuous valour, and the stage is clear for one of the more improbable but enchanting duets in any opera. A philosophical musing on the role of matrimony in society between the birdman Papageno and the heroine Pamina.
Triebe mit zu fühlen ist an der Weiber erste Pflicht. Wir wollen uns leben frei. Wir leben nicht im allein. Wir leben nicht
We should admit at this point that one of the moral dilemmas of the Magic Flute is sorting out who are the good people and who, in the best pantomime tradition, we should be booing. Sarastro starts the opera as the allegedly evil kidnapper of the Queen's blameless daughter, and the Queen as the aggrieved mother. Sarastro is later portrayed as all good. In which case, why does he tolerate a low-life servant like Monostatos? Caliban to his Prospero, perhaps? But from the beginning of the long and superb Act One finale, we are to assume, I suppose, that the court of Sarastro represents some form of moral superiority. Freemasonry, perhaps. And the Queen of the Night, an older, more evil order. The Archduchess and Roman Catholicism. The opening of the Act One finale will give us the chance to hear the three spirits, boys' voices, fresh and pure, and in the service of the evil Queen. Now, how did that happen?
Zum Ziele führt dich diese Bahn, doch musst du lebendig siegen. Drum höre unsere Lehre an, sei standhaft, duldsam und verschwiegen.
This long and miraculous finale will concern itself principally with Tamino's first contacts with the Sacred Order, over which Sarastro presides, and he has a long interview with a priestly figure, the speaker, before he can be considered for admittance. In his struggles, Tamino calls upon the services of his trusty flute, and we have an extended, exquisite, I suppose you would call it duet, for tenor and flute, which is also the most extended statement of the flute theme.
Wie stark ist nicht dein Zauberton, ein holde Flöte, du dein Spielen, selbst bildet ihre Freude fühlen. Wie stark ist nicht dein Zauberton, ein holde Flöte durch dein Spielen. Holde Flöte durch dein Spielen, selbst bildet ihre Freude, doch nur Panina bleibt davon.
Papageno's magic bells come into their own in the next incident, when Papageno and Pamina are threatened by the wicked Monostatos and his chorus of henchmen. Papageno remembers his magic bells, calls them into play, and the result is hilarious as he changes the menacing henchmen into harmless dancers. Such, you might conclude, is the power of music.
Wer viel wagt, gewinnt oft viel. Komm, du schönes Glockenspiel, lass die Glöckchen klingen, dass die Ohren ihnen singen. Das klinget so herrlich, das klinget so schön. La, 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 la. Wie hab ich so etwas gehört und gesehen? La, 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 la. Wie hab ich so etwas gehört und gesehen? La, 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 la.
The scene and the action open up now with the entrance of Sarastro. This is one of the great moments of the opera, as the full chorus hail the arrival on stage of this majestic figure who has dominated Act One in absentia and will dominate Act Two with his presence. Here is the chorus that greets Sarastro.
Flügel des Lebens,
There is an incident now when Pamina and Tamino meet, and one where we see Sarastro's justice in action. Because when Monostatos, the attempted molester of Pamina, tries to portray his action in a good light, Sarastro sees through him and orders him caned instead of rewarded, and the act ends as Pamina and Tamino, veiled, are led into the temple to begin the initiation rites. The chorus sing in praise of Sarastro's justice. Here is Sarastro in noble form welcoming the young couple, and the chorus's hymn of praise, which concludes the first act.
Hört diese beiden Fremdlinge in unseren Prüfungstempel ein. Bedecket ihre Häupter an. Sie müssen erst bereinigt sein.
The second act of the Magic Flute will concern itself with the trials through which Pamina and Tamino are to pass for membership in the order. And I suppose, by extension, the trials they will face in life together, both as man and wife, and as rulers of Tamino's kingdom, when the time comes for him to inherit the throne. The solemn tone of the second act, though of course it will not be without its hilarities, is set by the majestic and solemn march as the priests of the temple come together. The priests chat a bit about the suitability of Tamino for admission to the order, and then Sarastro has the first of his great arias. Slow, ponderous even in the wrong hands, but so invested with majesty and nobility that these arias are an indispensable part of the repertory of every bass singer. It will be important to keep these deep sonorities in the memory when we later hear the Queen of the Night. Here is just a little of Sarastro's deeply moving hymn of praise to the gods of his cult, Isis and Osiris, or, in German, Isis und Osiris.
O Isis Osiris, schenket der Weisheit Geist dem neuen Paar. Ihr der Wanderer Schritte lenket, stärkt mit Geduld sie
We can skip over the duet in which two priests of the temple warn Tamino of the wiles and deceptions of women, and concentrate on the trials Tamino and Pamina must undergo for admission to the order. First, we have the scene in the garden where Monostatos makes another of his approaches on Pamina, and does so in a quicksilver aria which is a marvellously deft challenge for the character tenor who must sing this tricky yet vital role. Here is a sample of Monostatos expressing, like Caliban, his need for love, or at least in this case, a stolen kiss.
Der liebe Freudenschnäbel tendet Herz und küsst. Oh, die soll die Liebe meiden, weil ein Schwarzer hässlich ist, weil ein Schwarzer hässlich ist. Ist mir denn kein Herz gegeben, bin ich nicht von Fleisch und Blut, bin ich nicht von Fleisch und Blut. Immer ohne Weibchen leben, wäre wahrlich Höllenglut, wäre wahrlich Höllenglut, wäre wahrlich Höllenglut.
As he was interrupted in Act 1 by the arrival of Papageno, he is interrupted now in more spectacular style by the Queen of the Night. She and her daughter Pamina have a dialogue in which mother tells daughter to kill Sarastro. When Pamina appears reluctant, the Queen launches into what is simply the most spectacular aria in any opera. It is called the Vengeance aria, and re-emphasizes a point we have made throughout, that this simple pageant, this pantomime-cum morality play, makes greater demands on its cast than almost any other opera ever written. Sarastro has some of the lowest notes ever written for a bass, and we shall demonstrate these again in a moment, and the Queen has the highest notes written for any singer in a standard operatic work. Singers call this highest note you'll hear F in alt, shorthand for F in altissima, meaning the F above top C. Beverly Sills used to call these her money notes, as they are what managements pay for. The Queen has lots of them to ping off in this dazzling demonstration of coloratura virtuosity. It is essential to hear this aria in full to savour its power. Now, while we have these stratospheric notes in our ears, let's hear Sarastro plumb the depths of the human voice. He sings of the absence of vengeance and base motives within his hallowed halls, and how love and friendship reign. And as he does, he descends, vocally speaking, to a low D, which is probably the lowest note written for any singer in a standard operatic role. What a stunning exercise in contrast and vocal versatility this opera is. Maybe just one verse of Sarastro's aria will make the point. Tamino has been sworn to a vow of silence, which is a very great pain for him, and an even greater one for Papageno. So when Pamina tries to speak to Tamino, he remains silent, and she, not unnaturally, assumes that he no longer loves her. She has a very gentle aria, Ach, ich fühl's, Ah, I know that all is ended, and the elegant, sustained legato of this aria makes it very difficult to bring off in the theatre. But here is a sample of its simple beauty. In contrast to the elevated sentiments of the noble classes, we have incidents from the life of your normal, everyday parrot man, Papageno. Tamino has, or, if I'm any judge of comic opera endings, soon will have, his noble Pamina. But Papageno would like to have a Papagena. Ein Mädchen oder Weibchen, he sings. He would like a young woman to be his wife. Here he sings of his longing, accompanying himself on the magic bells. What an endearing character he is.
Ein Mädchen oder Weibchen wünscht Papageno sich. O so ein sanftes Träumchen, wer Seligkeit für mich, wer Seligkeit für mich, wer Seligkeit für mich. Dann schmeckte mir Trinken und Essen, dann könnte ich mit Fürsten mich messen, des Lebens als weiser mich freuen und wie im Elysium sein. Dann könnte ich mit Fürsten mich messen, des Lebens als weiser mich freuen und wie im Elysium sein. Im Elysium sein. Im Elysium sein.
We've had to skip over many smaller incidents in this action-packed opera. Schikaneder was obviously the Steven Spielberg of his day, believing that his audience needed a thrill, or at least a special effect, every other minute, and he supplies them in dizzying profusion. But we must move now to the moment when the two armed men bring Tamino and Pamina together and prepare them to walk through the trials of fire and water, under a waterfall and through flames, to be purified and proven worthy of the rites of Isis and Osiris. The incident of their reunion is one to melt the heart. It is hard to say how it is that Mozart, by using the very simplest of musical means, is able to turn one's heart over. But then maybe that's a definition of genius. When Pamina and Tamino are united, she has a phrase, Tamino mine. It sounds the same in German and English. Oh, what joy! And he replies, Pamina mine. Then listen as exquisite, shifting, ascending panels of string tone lead them into their heartfelt music of reunion and reconciliation.
Ihr seht die Schreckenspforten, die Not und Tod mir drein.
That seems to me perhaps the noblest and most inspiring moment in an opera that makes a speciality of such moments. It's almost as if Mozart was saying that above the solemnities of a Sarastro or the dazzling splendours of the Queen of the Night stands the finest and noblest thing this earth has to offer, the love of a man and a woman. Of course, it depends rather on which man and which woman. When Papageno is eventually united with his Papagena, they get down to some serious bird love in their duet. A million miles removed, musically speaking, from that of the noble classes, but nonetheless enchanting for that. Papageno is suicidal at the thought of not finding his Papagena, but remembers his magic bells. When he plays them, the sound summons the three boys, who produce Papagena, and the two have an enchanting duet, which, properly sung, as here, can make children smile and adults weep.
Klingelt, Glöckchen, klingelt, schafft mein Mädchen her. Klingelt, Glöckchen, klingelt, bringt mein Weibchen her. Klingelt, Glöckchen, klingelt, Schafft mein Mädchen her, klingend, Glöckchen klingen, bringt mein Weibchen her. Klingend, Glöckchen klingen, bringt mein Mädchen her. Bringt sie her, mein Mädchen her, mein Weibchen her. Bist du mir nun ganz gegeben?
Nun bin ich dir ganz gegeben.
Nun so sei mein liebes Täubchen.
Nun so sei mein Herzenstäubchen,
Mein liebes Weibchen. Welche Freude wird das sein?
Welche Freude wird das sein?
Wenn die Götter uns bedenken.
Wenn die Götter uns bedenken, unsere liebe Kinder schenken, unsere liebe Kinder schenken,
So liebe kleine Kinderlein, Kinderlein, Kinderlein,
Kinderlein, so liebe kleine Kinderlein, so liebe kleine Kinderlein.
There is a short incident now which we might call the Queen of the Night's last stand. But she, her ladies, and Monostatos are defeated as the elements, wind and sun, conspire to banish darkness and with it their power. And we are ready for the very grand finale. Evil is defeated. The lovers are united. The Queen of the Night gets her comeuppance. The good end happily, and the bad end unhappily, which, as Oscar Wilde would point out a century later, is a definition of fiction. Here is Sarastro to tell us that the light of the sun has banished darkness, and the chorus join in a hymn of praise to Sarastro as Pamina and Tamino are inducted into the order and prepared to take their place in the world.
Die Strahlen der Sonne vertreiben die Nacht, zernichten der Heuchler, erschlichene Macht.
Well, as the Emperor says in Amadeus, there it is. A wonderful opera which succeeds in being every child's ideal introduction to the miraculous world of opera and musical theatre. An opera which combines elements of the greatest majesty with a wonderful quality of the spiritual. A work as deeply moving in its expression of the nobility of human love as it is sensual in its depiction of the pleasures of human carnality. Surely only someone who was a child at heart, a great human being, and the closest thing this earth offers to the voice of God, could have written it. Only Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart.